Freeway Killer, William Bonin's road of no return. He prowled the highways of Southern California with a smile, a van, and a secret no one was supposed to survive. Introduction: A Vanishing Trail. Between 1979 and 1980, a shadow fell over the sun-washed highways of Southern California. Teenagers, most of them boys, many from broken homes or living on the street, began to disappear. Days or weeks later, their bodies would be found dumped along roadsides, ravines, or beneath overpasses, battered and discarded like trash. The media dubbed the perpetrator the Freeway Killer. But they had no idea just how chillingly accurate that name would become, or how 3 different serial killers would eventually bear it during overlapping reigns of terror. This is the story of the most methodical and cold-blooded of them all, William George Bonin, a man who turned his van into a slaughterhouse, a man whose need for control, domination, and suffering defied all understanding, and a man who, for over a year, was hiding in plain sight, working a job, playing cards with neighbors, and prowling the highways with the devil in his passenger seat. Part 1: A Childhood Destined for Darkness. Born on January 8, 1947, in Willimantic, Connecticut, William Bonin entered the world already cursed. His father was an alcoholic and gambling addict, and his mother, emotionally distant and overwhelmed, did little to protect William or his 2 brothers from the storm inside their home. By the age of 6, Bonin had been sent to an orphanage where, by his own later accounts, he was sexually abused repeatedly. His trauma deepened at the Connecticut Juvenile Training School, where reports suggest further abuse. In an environment that prized silence over survival, Bonin learned 2 things: how to disassociate from pain and how to hide what he really was. At 18, Bonin joined the U.S. Air Force and was deployed to Vietnam. While he earned medals for bravery and claimed to have seen combat, those around him later recalled something chilling. He was fearless not because he was courageous, but because he seemed emotionally flat, untouched by life or death. When he returned home, the seeds of violence that had been planted during his youth were ready to bloom. In the early 1970s, Bonin was arrested for sexually assaulting multiple teenage boys. He was diagnosed as a sexual psychopath, and despite clear psychiatric evaluations warning that he posed a danger to others, he was paroled. This would become a tragic theme in Bonin's case. Red flags ignored, warnings dismissed, and legal cracks wide enough for a killer to walk through again and again. By 1970, Bonin was back in California, working as a delivery driver for Dependable Drive-Away, a job that gave him access to a van and complete autonomy. He could travel long distances, work irregular hours, and cruise the highways of Los Angeles, Orange County, and beyond without raising suspicion. The killer now had his freedom. He had his hunting ground. And the van, well, the van would become his kingdom of horror. Part 3: The Killing Begins. The murders began in mid-1979. Bonin would drive his van along freeway exits, bus terminals, skate parks, and convenience stores, looking for teenage boys, particularly runaways, hitchhikers, or those from unstable homes. His charm was disarming. He was older but friendly. He'd offer a ride, a drink, sometimes just a cigarette and a conversation. Many of his victims willingly stepped into the van, never knowing that it had been customized for control, with ropes, weapons, handcuffs, and sometimes another accomplice hidden in the back. One by one, the boys vanished. One by one, they were found. By October of 1979, bodies had begun turning up across Southern California, sometimes dumped just hours after their disappearance. Many victims showed signs of brutality and strangulation, though police withheld specific details at first. The pattern was too disturbing to ignore, and law enforcement realized they had a serial predator operating with frightening precision, but still, no one knew who he was. Part 4: The Monster and His Accomplices. Bonin did not always act alone. One of the most disturbing aspects of his spree was that he recruited others, young men and boys who were themselves troubled, desperate, or already criminally inclined. Key accomplices included Vernon Butts, a 21-year-old factory worker and occult enthusiast, became one of Bonin's earliest collaborators. Butts participated in several murders and even encouraged Bonin's sadism. Gregory Miley, just 18, was involved in multiple killings and later testified against Bonin. James Monroe, another teenager Bonin manipulated, assisted in at least one murder. Each accomplice was drawn in by Bonin's charisma and promises. Some were in awe, others terrified. A few later claimed they were too afraid to say no. One thing was clear: Bonin was the mastermind. They were merely instruments. The fact that multiple people participated and failed to alert authorities only magnified the horror. This wasn't just one man's madness, it was a network of silence. Part 5: Escalation and Final Victims. By early 1980, Bonin's killing spree had accelerated. He sometimes murdered multiple victims in the same week. He grew bolder, even careless, picking up victims in broad daylight, dumping bodies in visible locations. Among his final known victims were Stephen Wells, 18, who accepted a ride from Bonin in June 1980 and was never seen alive again. Daryl Jeans, 15, found dead shortly after Bonin reportedly offered him a ride home from a beach. Sean King, 14, abducted from a bus stop and later found in a ravine. Many of the boys had dreams. Some wanted to be musicians, others athletes. A few were struggling in school or escaping abuse. Bonin didn't care. He chose his victims for vulnerability, not value. After months of fear, suspicion, and mounting bodies, Bonin made one critical mistake. He allowed himself to be watched. In May 1980, detectives already surveilling Bonin due to his prior convictions followed him as he picked up a teenage boy. Bonin drove to a secluded location. They waited. They listened. And when they heard signs of a struggle, they stormed the van. What they found inside confirmed their worst fears: restraints, tools of torture, stolen items, and a teenager, terrified but alive. Bonin was arrested on the spot. Over the next weeks, as evidence piled up and accomplices were brought in, the full scope of the crimes emerged. Bonin eventually confessed to 21 murders and hinted at others he couldn't recall. Trial and execution. Bonin's trial began in 1981 and stunned the courtroom. The testimony from surviving victims, from accomplices, and the cold, clinical nature of Bonin's own statements made headlines nationwide. He showed no emotion, no remorse. He described the killings in flat, mechanical language. The prosecution called him the most heinous serial killer in California history. The defense could offer little more than his traumatic past. In 1982, Bonin was sentenced to death. He was later convicted in a second trial for additional murders and given another death sentence. He spent 14 years on death row at San Quentin, occasionally speaking to the press, never apologizing. On February 23, 1996, William Bonin was executed by lethal injection, the first in California to die by that method. His last meal was 2 pepperoni and sausage pizzas, and his last words were muted, almost disinterested. His execution brought relief to families, but not healing. For many, the pain never left. A legacy of fear and failure. The story of William Bonin is more than a tale of horror. It is a chilling indictment of a system that failed at every level. He was flagged by doctors, warned about by counselors, convicted, released, and allowed to roam free until it was far too late. He didn't just take lives, he took trust, hope, and safety from entire communities. And though his name may fade, the scars he left behind remain etched in the memories of those who lost, those who survived, and those who still remember the fear of waiting at a bus stop, wondering if the van would come for them next. Thank you for walking this dark road with us. Tonight, we looked inside the twisted world of William Bonin, the so-called Freeway Killer, a man who turned the open highways of California into a hunting ground and used a simple van as a vessel for unspeakable cruelty. His crimes weren't committed in the shadows. They happened in daylight, near neighborhoods, near homes, sometimes just a stone's throw from safety. And what makes his story so terrifying isn't just the brutality, it's how close he was to being stopped. Again and again, but no one did, until it was far too late. Bonin is gone now, executed, buried, and left behind. But the lessons, they remain. Because sometimes evil doesn't wear a mask. Sometimes it has a key to your street, a job, a name. Sometimes it drives a van and smiles. If you found this episode compelling, chilling, or important, subscribe, rate us, and share with someone who listens as closely as you do. Because next week, we go deeper and darker. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and keep your doors locked.